So we have a lot going on at the Preservation Society. I invite you to look at our website. We try and get everything up on there as quickly and swiftly as possible. So if you ever have questions, that is always the best first place to reference. It's newportmansions.org. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleagues, Leslie Jones and Patty Miller. Leslie has been our Director of Museum Affairs since 2019. She's also the Chief Curator of the Preservation Society. Leslie has worked as the VP of Museum Affairs and the Curator of Decorative Arts at the Cheekwood Estate in Nashville, and before that was the Curator and Director of Historical Resources and Programming for the White House Historical Association. Leslie received her bachelor's degree in the history of art and architecture from Miami University in Ohio, a master's in the history of decorative arts from the Smithsonian Institute's joint program with the Corcoran College of Art and Design, and another master's in the appraisal of fine and decorative arts from NYU. Leslie is an amazing asset to the Preservation Society, and we are so excited that she's here with us and willing to share this evening. Now, Patty is our Chief Conservator, a right hand to Leslie. They're an amazing duo. And Patty has been with the Preservation Society since 2015. Patty has previously worked for several private conservation firms specializing in architecture, object, and monument conservation for clients including the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, Metropolitan Museum of Art, Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, and the National Park Service. Patty received a BFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago and a Master's of Science from Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, Preservation, and Planning. So, without further ado, please let me welcome Leslie up to the podium with a nice round of applause.
Thank you, Sarah. The only piece that's missing from our resumes is that Patty and I also went to the same high school. So it was
many years apart.
So that was an immediate bond. I just want to echo what Sarah was saying. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being members of the Preservation Society. Many of you I know are also local to Newport, so the fact that on top of the fact you already get free admission to our sites, you've decided to go the extra mile and pledge your support to us as an institution. And it shows to us that while we take our jobs very seriously, you also take it seriously too. And it gives us a tremendous amount of pride to know that you all are here, that you see value in the work that we do, and in us doing it forward as well, not just today, but into the future. As Sarah mentioned, I'm the Director of Museum Affairs and Chief Curator for the Preservation Society, and in our department, if you're not familiar, we have the collections team, the conservation team, curatorial team, and education. It's a lot wrapped into one. It's essentially the museum department in the museum, and it is truly an honor for me to work with Patty. Knowing her work even before I got here, she is such an asset to the PS. And all of the work that you see that keeps these buildings looking beautiful, but also with meaningful substantive research, is under Patty's direction. So I just want to make sure that I give her the introduction that she deserves. Yes. We're going to be taking you on a journey through the last year. And while it's only lasting an hour, believe me, it felt like it was a lot longer than that. We will be looking at a few special projects first, and then going through each of our houses in chronological order. They are not ordered by favorites. They are ordered by, the age, so I don't want anyone to feel like we're skipping anything here. I think one of the projects we are most proud of this year was set forth in our strategic plan that was completed about 3.5 years ago, and that was to introduce the idea of a collections care facility to the Preservation Society's collection management practice. We had, based on an inventory, about 15,000 square feet of storage space in our own houses being used, which meant closets, underbeds, bathrooms, servants' quarters, you name it, there was stuff inside of it. And it was really important to us to not only make sure that those objects had a proper home in a climatized, conditioned space to make sure that they're maintained for as long as possible, but also for us to assess the spaces that were being used because they could be put to better use for tours and for access by the public and our guests. So last year, we were able to secure a lease of an off-site collections care facility that we were able to retrofit as part of its construction. It's a 10-year lease, and we partnered with a wonderful architecture firm as well as a custom museum shelving design firm. And all of the shelving that you see on the right-hand side was custom designed and ordered for this space, manufactured in Germany and shipped over, and now is all in place. So just looking at the screen, you can see on the left a very large open space. Immediately when I think Patty and I walked in here, we thought, there's not gonna be enough room. There's not gonna be enough room. So we will be filling this space very quickly. And to date, we have, again, all of the storage capacity now installed with movable racks to help utilize the space to its maximum potential. On the left, you'll see in the background, again, those movable racks on tracks with wheels that turn them. Really advanced and important dedicated equipment for the moving and maintenance of materials, such as these racks that will have any sort of two-dimensional objects like mirrors or framed pieces being transported through the space, and also to be observed by not only our team, but also by visiting researchers. Sort of I guess an underlying goal here is to also make, again, our collections more accessible for further research, to broaden our appeal to more museums, another generation also of scholars who want to look at objects to tell stories through them. So this, while it looks like a boring warehouse, next year you're going to see some really great pictures of all the things on the shelves, so please come back 1 year from now. We also, in a very exciting initiative, again based on our strategic plan, have launched our collections database online, and Jenna Duplessis is in the audience, and I want to give her a round of applause for leading this. Jenna is our archivist and also a savant on the internet, and has worked with our database company to help create this platform. It's attached to our website, so if you visit newportmansions.org and click on the Collections tab, you can access this, even though it's technically a totally separate website. We are currently able to share with the public a large collection of our archival materials, so ephemera, photography, letters, photo albums are now able to be searched and viewed. This is in kind of a beta test for us before we fully launch all of our physical objects, including furniture, paintings, tapestries, and the like. So as members, we would certainly appreciate if you're bored for an hour and a half, or even 10 minutes one day, and want to go through this website. There is the ability for you to submit feedback to us and let us know how the user capacity and capability is, and what you have found so interesting through these new explorations of our collections. I know even our staff, the non-museum affairs staff, has done a little bit of fun poking around on here, and have found, Kat in the back can testify, big thumbs up, thank you. It's just so wonderful to know that these materials aren't just sitting on a shelf. They're now accessible to people even in their own living rooms. So a really wonderful objective that we've been able to accomplish, and hopefully further as we move forward. Another forthcoming project will be our first ever collections catalog. I'm incredibly proud of this project. Nikki Williams, our Curator of Collections, is doing a fantastic job project leading this. We're partnering with D. Giles Limited, a London publishing house, and these are some of the really wonderful publications that they've worked on with other institutions. It will host about 100 objects from our collections with detailed photographs and entries from not only our staff, but also professionals and experts from across the museum field and the art history world. We want to thank the Decorative Arts Trust and the Carpenter Foundation for early grants to help make this project possible. So we are working towards this being released in 2027, and it will be available for purchase through our own gift shops as well as through other major book publication retail stores. Another great accomplishment over the past year, and it might not seem like a lot, but to us it feels tremendous. We were able to return 96 original objects to our collection from across our 11 houses. Thank you. As many of you can imagine, as we have taken ownership and care of these 11 properties, not all of them came with all of their original materials. So our team, as well as actually many of you, We go through auctions online, we get catalogs sent to us, I get emails, I get texts in the middle of the night that they can't sleep, so they're on Sotheby's website, you better see what's there. So it's been an incredible journey over the past 6 years to have that information coming through and then being able to try and reacquire these materials. So at the Elms, we have an original small statue. We're able to confirm this not only based on historic photography of the interiors, but then also from the auction catalog when all of the interior contents were dispersed. At Kingscote, we have been engaging members of the Jones family. If you're not as familiar with your Kingscote history, George Noble Jones was the original patron of Kingscote, having it built by architect Richard Upjohn, and his family sold it as a result of the Civil War. All of the contents also went off with the family, and we have now re-engaged descendants of that family, and original materials specifically designed for Kingscote's original structure are coming back to us through gift, which is also tremendous. At Chateau sur Mer, there was a very under-the-radar auction in Providence. Thankfully, we had our internet antennae up, and we were able to reacquire 12 objects original to Chateau sur Mer. And further, partnering with our neighbors, Newport Restoration Foundation, Doris Duke acquired a lot of materials as Chateau sur Mer's collections were distributed, and 68 objects were transferred to us from Newport Restoration Foundation. So a great community partnership. They were works of export porcelain from China that were never on view at Rough Point. And so the collections committee there made a really honorable decision to transfer them back to us, and they are now on view at Chateau sur Mer. And then at the Breakers, a lovely collection of 6 hand-painted stemmed glasses that you see on the right here that we'll get a little bit further into the details of as we move along, but supposedly they were a gift from Alice Vanderbilt to a gardener and a floral arranger who she had great affection for. So wonderful stories to come along with these objects as well. In terms of objects coming in, we also have objects going out. As part of a museum process, as outlined by the American Alliance of Museums, collections deaccessions are a healthy part of your collections management action and program. So we have had a series of technicians, temporary expert staff members going through our collections with us, helping us to identify unknown objects that we've found as part of this process, but also to ensure that what we are maintaining is specifically of importance to these houses and tells important stories. So this is an ongoing process. It's not something that we start and stop. It's basically enduring. So as you can see here, some of the behind the scenes, some spaces also relating to our collections care facility. On the top right, you'll see what was the Elms Garage. If you have been recently to the Elms Cafe, that was that space a year ago. So all of the materials there had become sort of a wayward storage facility. We've been able to remove all of those and make incredibly important decisions with our collections committee on what objects we should retain in our collection and what objects might be better suited at another museum. Of course, the Richard Morris Hunt exhibition that opened in May, Dr. Catherine Moran is here. She was my co-contributor to that project, along with Teo Lorenzo, our research fellow. An incredibly successful program thus far. We have had over 30,000 people visit that exhibition since May, so we hope we'll get more as well. It's a wonderful collaboration with really prestigious institutions, and again, elevating our collection and our status within the museum world is a big part of this. We were direct partners with the Library of Congress with loans, as well as the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, the Bennington Museum of Art in Bennington, Vermont, and the Vermont Historical Society. So a lot of really wonderful collaborations as a part of this. And likewise, artistic collaborations. If you can tell on this wall what is three-dimensional and what is not, good for you, most people can't. But there are 3 pieces, sort of in a center V, that have the shadows. Those are 19th century plaster casts of historic architecture. Everything else on that wall is hand-painted as replicating other works of plaster casts that are in public collections. Karen Rourke is a local artist, and she was able to take a referential list we submitted to her, and she was able to paint all of these on a 2-dimensional board to help replicate the idea of what plaster casts meant to Richard Morris Hunt and his 19th century advancement of architecture and art in America. So really, again, fantastic collaborative efforts as a part of the show. All right, we're going to get into the site's overview. We, of course, start with our pride and joy, our oldest child, Hunter House. Lots of great work by Patty's team at this house, following up on a lot of the research that's been done over the past few years. I'm going to let her speak to that. We are also, of course, well aware that 2026 is the semi-quincentennial of America, the 250th anniversary. So we, again, are also and have been in the process of planning a lot of major events, programs, and exhibitions based on that research at Hunter House, but also our knowledge about Newport during many of those monumental eras celebrating America's birth. We have also, for the first time, had our longtime live-in caretaker move out of the third floor. Peggy is an institution at the Preservation Society, and we all adore her so much because she dedicated herself to the maintenance of Hunter House. With her departure from the third floor, where she has lived for many decades, we do now, though, have an opportunity to actually study the third floor and reveal, hopefully, more information and stories about what that space was intended for when the house was completed and what it's been used for throughout its many decades since. And, as I'll be talking about, we will be studying the landscape at Hunter House. But I'm going to turn it over to Patty to talk about, it's not a piece of cake on the right-hand side. That's a stratigraphic layer of paint. So I'll let Patty take it from here.
So this past year, the properties department let us know that they were going to be repainting Hunter House. And always when we have the opportunity to repaint, we like to look back at the history of how we painted something, what our research, what our analysis has shown, sort of what we've followed. And we did a wonderful paint examination about 20 plus years ago with a historic paint analyst, and they determined a historic color for the house. Now, this is very difficult with a house that has been built in different periods, has had many alterations, including the alterations that happened post our acquiring the building and trying to bring it into shape as a historic house building. So I chose to go back and look at the paint analysis and also look at the historical period that is the Preservation Society's historical period of restoring the house and maintaining the house over the last 75 plus years. And one of the things in going through the archive, first we looked back at the paint samples, and I kind of identified a layer that I thought would be that historic first layer for the Preservation Society based on some notes we had. And then we went back to the archive. Jenna and I looked through a lot of documents relating to the early history and the restorations of the house, and we found some interesting words and interesting phrases in letters back and forth from people and parts of the advisory committee very early on for the house. And we also had about a year or 2 years earlier, an email come in from a gentleman who said, I forget where he lived, but Massachusetts, and he said, I painted my house, Hunter House gray, back in the 70s. Do you used to have a match for that color? And we went, gray? Hunter House gray? You know, like we've been living with this sort of a kind of a tannish kind of color for a while, like a creamy tan color for a while. I started to follow that thread a little bit, and just so you see, here on the, I think, left-hand side of the screen is an image roughly around circa 1963 for the house, and it's hard to tell from old photographs what the color actually is, but it corresponded, what I thought, with what you see with the arrow in this cross-section of paint from what I think is, based on the specifications of the house, that said multiple layers of white lead primer, followed by a color. And the color wasn't specified, but there were documents that said it was painted a gray. Then we found reference to something that was so cool, I couldn't believe it. They said back in the 60s, a company had come through and organized a whole series of colors that were based on the Preservation Society's color palette and other historic buildings in Newport. And the company is Colorizer Paints, which is actually a group out of Utah, and we didn't have a sample of this. I found a version of this on the internet and then tracked one down at Historic New England, took my paint sample to Historic New England and confirmed the color match for the Hunter House Gray, which actually, if you look in the corner, it actually says 27C 15 Hunter House Gray. And so now we had the answer to that. It's important to know that paint is a very easy thing to change on a historic building, and it's all about the period of significance in architectural preservation. And in discussions with Leslie, I said, this is kind of significant, especially coming up on this historical kind of documented period that we're looking at in the semi-quincentennial, I never can say that word, and also just looking at our history and also just the interpretation of the house. So we really see this as another element to interpreting the Preservation Society history through Hunter House's history. So saying that was really exciting to find and exciting to see that our color matched up with Hunter House Gray. And so we went on to paint the house that color.
If you find one of these in your attic, please don't throw it away.
We
Please
don't
give it
own
to
one.
us.
We don't own one. They said they used to keep them at the time it was, I forget. It was, no, they kept it at I forget whatever the Newport's main building was. But anyway, not. No, it doesn't matter. Anyway, can't remember. Anyway, and they would just give them out if anybody wanted one, and so, and they have like all sorts of different buildings on there, and colors of different buildings, even the color of what I believe was the Rochambeau statue. But it has the exterior colors, it has the exterior color of Hunter House, and then it has some of the interior colors like the mahogany color, the green colors, things like that. So this was quite a find, and we're hoping to locate one in the future. I have feelers out. So then we also wanted to make sure that we took care of the pineapple as part of the exterior paint project. And the pineapple had been painted, from what I knew from our own history, about twice before in this polychrome style. But theory was that it was painted polychrome historically. If you know the story of the pineapple, it went away from the Hunter House for a while and was taken over to another building in the Point, and then it was brought back by the Preservation Society, the whole entryway. And this pineapple is the original historic pineapple, and we did some paint analysis on it to try and determine generationally what the colors were, and we came upon this series of colors for us for this time period. And again, this was, the painting was facilitated by the artist Karen Rourke. And then we also had to do the lovely historic landmark. The registered landmark sign that's on the front of the house, on the Washington Street side of the house, had gone quite corroded and was unreadable. So we took that opportunity as well to refinish and restore the plaque, and it's now back in place.
Okay. Like I was mentioning before, with the semi-quincentennial coming up next year, we have been planning exhibitions as well as programming, and Hunter House next summer will be home to a series of plays that we have commissioned to tell the stories of the female experience during the Revolution, the enslaved experience during the Revolution, and the loyalist experience during the Revolution. We all know the Patriots. We know what the Patriots were going through, but Hunter House at that time was owned by the Wanton family during the American Revolution, and the Wantons were loyalists. So we want to make sure that that perspective of the house is being shared as a part of this commemorative year. And the plays will be on the back lawn of Hunter House throughout the summer. There'll be ticketed admission, and really the only backdrop we need is the house itself. We have contracted a firm known as Plays in Place out of Massachusetts who hire historians who are also playwrights. So while some of the information and the narrative is a bit embellished, it is all based on historical documentation and well documented and cited as a part of the experience. So it will sort of be like a living textbook about what we believe the experience of these three groups of people, even interchanged as well, happened during 1776 and during the Revolution. Moving on to Kingscote. As I had mentioned, we have Jones Family Furniture returning to the site. We had a wonderful grant also from the Charles A. and Lois H. Miller Foundation to help revitalize and reuse the stables once again for the welcoming experience of our visitors and guests. And that also resulted in some wonderful new introductory panels that were done by Eve Loftus and Nikki Williams from our team, our curatorial team, thank you. We have new attributions to some of the furniture in our collection based on work by one of our research fellows, just to go again that our work is never done here. We are also reprogramming the servants' quarters at Kingscote because we were adding research fellows to our lineup, so we needed more space for their offices. Likewise, we have with us this evening a research fellow who's dedicated to the Kingscote archival collection, and a cultural landscape report that's coming up. And I didn't get a chance to mention this at Hunter House. I guess that slide wasn't there, but we are doing 2 cultural landscape reports this year. And a cultural landscape report is essentially a fully cited report about what we know the history of the landscape to be, both in its natural environment, but also the way it gets manipulated through the additions of buildings and garden ornament and sort of planted ornamental spaces, because Kingscote and Hunter House are still anomalies in that way. There are lots of photos of them, but there's usually some sort of fence or something in that historical documentation that doesn't make it entirely clear. And I'll have a great example of that at Kingscote in a second on one of the next slides. But we're going to be using that information to help revitalize the landscapes themselves through planting plans and care for the sites, but then also trying to better understand where missing buildings are. Each of these sites had other buildings on their properties. Where were they? What were they used for? And again, it's more of a holistic way of looking at our properties. These are examples of the original Jones family furniture and materials that are coming back to Kingscote. A very sweet swan child's cradle that was for the Jones family at Kingscote, as well as a series of French porcelain ceramics that were especially ordered by the Jones family to be used at their summer retreat in Newport at Kingscote. New interpretation panels, as I'd mentioned, in the Kingscote barn, really introducing people to the entire story that they'll be experiencing, because we did redo the tour at Kingscote a few years ago, so this helps frame people's experience before they're able to go through the house and listen to the audio tour. The Carpenter Foundation, as I'd mentioned, has given a wonderfully generous grant to help support conservation for objects in our catalog. And some of those objects include these 2 wonderful images that we are quite famous for owning. They are opposing views of the Canton Harbor during the 19th century. And they give very distinctive perspectives on what the sort of merging of Western and Chinese cultures are experiencing as this harbor becomes so rapidly developed for export and import. Likewise, a grouping of chairs that are actually at Chateau-sur-Mer, but they are Kingscote chairs that we did not realize are Chinese in origin, mostly because of their materials, but also because of experts who've examined them now, and they're unique chairs, unlike others that other museums have. So to give us more leverage to do more work on these pieces, have them featured in the catalog, and then also have them back on view for the public when you come to see. Through our research, through one of our previous fellows, Priscilla Bright, we've been able to attribute one of the small stands at Kingscote to the firm Kimball and Cabus. And they're not one of the most well-known firms of 19th century furniture. In fact, 19th century furniture as a whole is largely overlooked by scholarship, except for people like us who love furniture. Kimball and Cabus was one of the most prolific and artistically driven New York firms that produced furniture in America, and they really tried to integrate these newly immersive international design influences into something new. The Brooklyn Museum of Art on the right actually did a really wonderful exhibition and catalog on Kimball and Cabus. As we were researching this, or as Priscilla was researching this, again, the stand on the left is in our collection, and she was able to find it, if you see the number 398 in the center image, as part of the Kimball and Cabus catalog. So we can now also see how it was being marketed and sold, and therefore how the owners of Kingscote probably purchased it and put it into their house. Again, the Kingscote servants' quarters are being repurposed for new offices for our research fellows. We previously had 4 research fellows, but this year we were lucky enough to have 6. They're doing incredibly important work, and they need dedicated spaces to conduct that work, so we're very happy to be reprogramming these spaces. And the cultural landscape report. Kingscote in particular, there is some wonderful late 19th century photography, early 20th century photography that shows the house from the Bellevue Avenue perspective, but the fence is so high and it's so overgrown, you can't really see what else is going on. Likewise, if you're looking at the image on the bottom left of Kingscote in probably the mid-19th century, that is not the Newport landscape. This is a painting that was done of Kingscote by an unknown artist, but it basically has put this Gothic Revival house in a Hudson Valley landscape. It's not a Aquidneck Island. So again, what is going on? So we have to compile all of this information along with some of the ground-penetrating radar that we partnered with Dartmouth to conduct across the properties to, again, help enliven what the history of this landscape is. This is incredibly important, one, because as you may know, at the corner of Bowery and Bellevue, somebody's car is always crashing into our fence. So we'd like to understand the history of that fence before we replace it and go through the expense. But further, here is that perimeter for the actual property. Coming up soon, as you may have heard and seen, there is a new development that will be a next-door neighbor to Kingscote. A very large, well, actually, it's not, to me it feels large. It's a boutique hotel that will be where that parking lot is. And there is an access point on Jones Street between the red and the yellow squares here currently for our landscape. And we want to make sure that as we program this space, it is accommodating and understanding of how this area of Newport's going to change. We want this space to feel accessible to the public, like it's your own backyard, but also that we're responsibly managing it and taking care of its historic integrity. So again, that's why the cultural landscape report is so very important. So stay tuned how we learn more and we see this construction evolve. At Chateau-sur-Mer, hands up who's watching the Gilded Age or watched the Gilded Age. Okay, you're in the right place. So we, of course, had more filming at Chateau-sur-Mer, and we'll show some behind the scenes of that. Again, as I had mentioned too, many original objects returning to Chateau-sur-Mer this year. It was a great year for the Wetmore collection. We also have been working on, since with the great success of our Monumenta 50th anniversary celebration last year, as you remember, the 1974 exhibition of monumental outdoor contemporary sculpture across Newport. The only surviving work in situ is Richard Fleischner's sod maze at Chateau-sur-Mer. And partnering with Mr. Fleischner, who is a living artist, he has now gifted to us about 20 drawings of his planning for that sculpture from the 1970s and beyond. And we will be exhibiting those works as well as other supporting works from Monumenta as part of an exhibition this winter upstairs at Rosecliff. So to again honor that commitment to Monumenta back in the 1970s, but also to showcase how contemporary art in historic context can actually work quite well together. We are digitizing a lot of our new collections that are coming in. The exhibition for Richard Morris Hunt included a lot of works from Chateau-sur-Mer that Patty's team had to take hours and hours to bring up to its best condition. Important elements that might not seem so exciting to you, but new shears for selected windows. This was a years in the making accomplishment, so we're very excited for those shears. Not only are they aesthetically more pleasing, but also they again add this extra barrier for UV filtration to help protect the house. Wonderful treatments of materials, including our library rug and library vases. And also this past year, 2024, was the first time in 20 years that Chateau-sur-Mer was open for the holidays. And we will be continuing that tradition this year. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. And of course, we had lots of prep for coaching weekend, because as you probably know, Chateau-sur-Mer is the home to most of the horses, as a temporary tent is put up to act as a makeshift stable for the horses for that weekend. So any anecdotes you want to share about any behind the scenes stories about filming at the Gilded Age? I stay far away from filming. I don't want to see it.
I wasn't on the site for this one, but I do know that in terms of doing this constantly, we've gotten into a really great pattern, and we have the whole Museum Affairs Department usually chip in on monitoring the prep and the filming, and then also the breakdown of the sets. It's a huge effort to shift all of our objects and protect all of our objects and the spaces during this time period, and Chateau is one that I'm very adamant about protecting because there's so many sensitive surfaces in that house. So if you can imagine protecting all the wallpapers, all the wood, the staircase textile that's on the wall, all of that has to be very carefully protected and monitored during the filming process. So I just run checks basically at this point. I go pop in and out unannounced. And there's like, oh, Patty's here. So out on the radio, you hear that. But it's just so they are always aware that conservation is constantly observing the wonderful work that they do and the job that they do. But, you know, my first priority is protection of the house. And yeah, that was that.
We're also now 1 year into the geothermal system being fully on at Chateau-sur-Mer, which was an incredible endeavor to have our first climatized system in the house. And thus far, the materials are responding to it very positively. I can attest that being in the dining room, which you see on the right-hand side here over the summer, usually when the humidity would seep in, the leather on the walls would start to sag a little bit. It has stayed taut and against the wall all summer long. So I'd say the experiment has worked. It's very exciting. And again, Patty had a lot to do with that program, as well as our collections team. So a very exciting endeavor. And I will mention that Marble House is next. So exciting to add more climate systems to our properties. These are some of the great acquisitions that came through an auction in particular in Providence. On the left is, by a Philadelphia artist, the only known painting that we have of William Shepherd Wetmore, who built Chateau-sur-Mer, along with Minton Porcelain. I think collectively our entire institution's favorite acquisition this year. In the center bottom is a Tiffany trophy that has little tiny cats arched up on the side, and we call it the cat cup. And it says, to George Peabody Wetmore from the kittens. And apparently, George Peabody Wetmore was an early investor and funder of cat shows in New York City. Before Westminster Dog Show, cat shows were all the rage. So this was their devoted thank you gift to him. We have next to that also a Tiffany sterling silver platter with the Wetmore family crest engraved in the center, examples of Chinese export snuff bottles, some French ceramics as well, original to the house. And on the top right is an inscribed piece of paper as well as a little cord, and it's part of the transatlantic cable that George Peabody Wetmore was an investor for the laying of. So this was a really personal memento for us to be able to reacquire. So, and if you're not familiar with that history, I heavily advise you getting yourself up to speed on it, because without the transatlantic cable, we wouldn't communicate across the ocean, across the sea. So, as terms of the Gilded Age goes, it's one of the most significant technological advances of the 19th century that has helped bring us to where we are today. That's your homework assignment. These are examples of Richard Fleischner's very generous gift of his works contributing to sod maze, photographs, measured drawings, tracing paper, really giving us a behind-the-scenes view of the creation of this beautiful earthwork, which is, of course, also based on classical and historical design ideas like labyrinths and mazes and gardens. And excitingly enough, too, in 2025, I believe, yes, in this year, we officially accessioned this sculpture into our collection. So whereas before it was just part of the landscape, it's now a sculpture in our collection, and we intend to maintain it at the highest standards. Patty gave lots of really awesome tours of the geothermal with Mike Tabor, sort of beneath Chateau-sur-Mer, showcasing all the work and engineering that went into this process and the technology. We expected to have one tour with 10 people. I think we had 3 or 4 tours fully sold out. So good to know everybody's interested in the technology-driven work that we're doing here. Again, a wonderful image here of Heather Hodge, our now former textile conservator. She had the most incredible opportunity to go to the Cleveland Art Museum, so she's She took that opportunity. We're so excited for her, but she did wonderful work in stabilizing our textile collection while she was with us. And this is just a brief moment seeing her doing that stabilization of the library rug from Chateau-sur-Mer. At Chepstow, we have with us here again tonight a wonderful research fellow who is dedicated to going through the Chepstow archive. The third floor of Chepstow, again, is a house that was gifted to the Preservation Society with all of its contents, has so many papers, so many journals and diaries and ephemeral materials that we just have never had the opportunity to catalog and make sure that we know exactly what we have and also organize it so that we know where we can find it going forward. So that's a tremendous task, and I wish you the best of luck. We've also compiled inventories of the vast silver holdings at Chepstow. There's a lot of the collection at Chepstow that will be going into our research for the collections catalog that's forthcoming, as well as the incredible collection that Alida Morris McBean developed over her lifetime of her early American ancestors. Those will be part of our Revolutions Reimagined exhibition that's commemorating the semi-quincentennial in 2026. So here are just a few examples of, yes, there is a closet dedicated to silver at Chepstow. I don't have one of those in my house, but I do love that Alida had a closet just for silver. So this has been very expertly organized as well as now inventoried and photographed, I should mention. Objects from the collection also that Patty's team did really important treatment on for the exhibition. It might be easy to miss, but if you're looking at the right-hand side, you can see a before and after of the in-painting that had to be done to sort of bring this object back to life. At Green Animals Topiary Garden, we have not opened that house again for this year. I think we might be on year 5 in not opening the Green Animals farmhouse. And that has a lot to do with the condition of the house itself and also with a mold remediation problem that we are still working on. It does not have a climate system, and it is not a house that was, necessarily designed with air circulation in mind. So we are working on that as a team and hope to have more plans in the future about reopening the space as well as a more purposeful use of the incredible collections that were developed there. We have moved some materials from that house to put it into a climatized space at our collections care facility, and the pest control, as I said, we're working on. And again, also Alice Brayton, who gifted the house and all of its contents, as well as the incredible topiary garden, to the Preservation Society, was a historian in her own right. She even wrote a book about Newport's history. She also is the reason why Arnold Burying Ground is a part of our collection. She saved that plot of land as well as all the burial markers. So she has an incredible collection of Newport history, both on her bookshelves as well as throughout the house. These are some current conditions of the house itself, as we continue to monitor it. It's in stable condition, but obviously not in a condition that we're ready to allow the public into. And a lot of that also is to do, it's not a house that was designed to be a museum. There are very narrow passageways. It's very fully furnished. So it's not in a place at this point where we feel like it's the attraction as to why people go to Green Animals. They go there for the Green Animals, as it's named. So we were doing the behind-the-scenes work and hope to have more information as we develop more strategic plans going forward. I should also mention at Green Animals, it has become the destination for family programming. That's run by Kate Pedersen and Mackenzie Marin as a part of our team here, and we get hundreds of families out at Green Animals every summer doing outdoor programming, inviting them into nature and experiencing something that's not on a screen and something that's not technology-induced, but more so giving that return to simpler, more tactile, craft-oriented opportunities has been a real success. Isaac Bell House, we updated you last year on the incredible work done by our properties team and our conservation team with the restoration of its exterior. The interior is also getting some love these days. We have a highly acclaimed wallpaper scholar who came to visit us recently, who will be working and writing on the collection of wallpaper at Isaac Bell House that we'll get into a bit. Inventories of all the materials. Yes, if you don't know, there are some original materials to the house itself that are still in there, even though it's largely unfurnished. Also, as a part of the exterior treatment that was done to the house, we had to remove that wonderfully beautiful stained glass window of Bertrand Bell, who was Isaac Bell's brother. That is a loan to us from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, so that has been returned to its space. And if you aren't familiar with who Richard Guy Wilson is, he is an acclaimed professor of architectural history at the University of Virginia. And he has, for the past 36 years, led the annual Victorian Society of America's Newport Summer School, taking students and very interested individuals on a crash course of meaningful American architecture as seen here in Newport. And this was his last year. So the torch is being passed on to a new director of the program, but we were very pleased to be able to thank Dr. Wilson for all of his work and all that he's contributed to, not just through the Victorian Society's school, but also through other researchers and scholars who are looking at Newport and examining the significance of our architectural history and heritage. And I'll let Patty talk a bit about the exciting work that's going to be done in the kitchen this year. Dr. Astrid Wagner is the director of the German Wallpaper Museum, so she knows a thing or two about wallpaper, and she has been incredibly enthralled with the collection of wallpapers by Paul Bellin at Chateau-sur-Mer as well as at Isaac Bell House. And this is an example of that Bellin wallpaper that is in Mrs. Bell's dressing room. So she is going to be highlighting our collection of wallpaper as a part of a forthcoming publication. So that was a very exciting surprise. And again, another way for us to elevate the standing of our collection with international scholars. And then I will let Patty talk about the kitchen and pantry work.
So after the exterior restoration, we had a private donor come to us and offer a gift to do anything that we wanted to do on the interior that maybe hadn't been addressed in the previous restoration or recently. And one of the things that I've always been keen about is expanding the tour so that people can get access to the butler pantry, the sort of prep kitchen, and the kitchens at the back with the hearth. And so right now the tour doesn't go back that way because there's a hole in the kitchen floor. And so one of the other things is the large sandstone lintel that's in the hearth has a large crack in it, and we want to stabilize that. Before we got involved with that, we also wanted to address some of the flaking paint and things that were in the kitchen and the two adjacent sort of prep rooms and the butler pantry that's there. So we did a little paint analysis in those areas, as we always do, before the work started, and then a team came in and did a lot of plaster work and paint, and then also replaced some damaged woodwork in the kitchen that actually was due to one of the windows leaking prior to the restoration. So we're hoping that in the next 4 months or so, we'll get on to the kitchen work, which will be the completion of that particular grant.
Okay. To Marble House. Again, more inventorying of the third floor storage. Marble House was really one of the locations where when we had a survey done of how our objects were being stored, this was one of the most alarming of spaces because there is a servants' hall on the third floor that has very narrow passages, and somehow big pieces of furniture were fit into those narrow passages and into rooms. Likewise, they are very interesting rooms that could present a great narrative to share with the public. So we were happy to get that inventory going, and also we found information about the house we didn't know about. We had a lot of filming for HBO's Gilded Age there as well, treatment of objects for the Richard Morris Hunt exhibition. Obviously, it's one of our signature Richard Morris Hunt homes. A research fellow, Teo Lorenzo, who worked on the Hunt exhibition, focused a lot of his time at Marble House. Digitization of important archival materials. Nikki Williams also represented the Preservation Society on a trip to Mobile, Alabama, which is, of course, Alice Erskine Smith Vanderbilt Belmont's childhood home. And the Historic Preservation Society of Mobile, Alabama has two really significant portraits of Alva and her husband, both of which are featured upstairs in the exhibition. We have been wanting these on loan for a very, very long time. So Nikki's wonderful ambassadorship on behalf of the Preservation Society was a catalyst to start that conversation. We also had the introduction of a rain garden at Marble House to help work with our green initiatives to offset runoff of rainwater through into other properties and more so to contain it. And the trophy case in the trophy room upstairs needed repairs because somebody sat on it. So, inventory of the third floor. One of my favorite pictures of the past year, Cassie and Brooke upstairs in the center there, surrounded by linens. There are so many linens at Marble House, as well as wonderful works of metalsmith. Of course, the Plateau by Paul Storr that goes with one of our other wonderful collections. The Vanderbilt family flatware that was custom designed by Tiffany. Several toilette accessories, glassware, and other materials belonging to other houses, including some Davenport pieces that are actually original to the Breakers. So we found a lot at Marble House. Patty and her team did wonderful treatments also to objects from Marble House, materials that were original to the Gothic room that are upstairs, as well as accessories that have come back to interpret that space. Further, as you see in the center there, these are two maquettes by Daniel Chester French, who was the artist who created part of the memorial to Richard Morris Hunt on Fifth Avenue after his death. And we were gifted these two maquettes that stand about, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 inches, 18 inches? Okay, 12 inches? 12 inches tall, and these were Chester French's working drafts for that monument. And again, these were gifted to us by members of the Hunt family. And then reliquaries. This particular piece is part of our collection. It's not original to Marble House or to Richard Morris Hunt, but it is an object that both we are able to use to communicate Hunt's collecting as well as the Vanderbilt's collecting, in that we do know from inventory lists they did collect religious reliquaries as sort of conversation pieces, not because they had a particular affiliation with any faith, but because they were old and they looked really cool. Further to objects in our collection given to us as gifts by members of the Hunt family is this wonderful portrait by an unidentified artist of Richard Howland Hunt, Richard Morris Hunt's eldest son, and a partner in the Hunt & Hunt firm that took over his father's legacy in architecture following his death in 1895. And Dagan Ferranz, who is our conservation specialist, was able to pull some strings with his mother, who is an expert painting conservator, to have this piece treated as a part of the exhibition. And then also on the right-hand side, this did not come with a frame. This particular frame was part of the inventory of a dear friend of the Preservation Society, Dwight Jameson, who's a local artist. He also collects antique frames. And he had this frame, and he showed it to Patty, and Patty said, "Oh, that's perfect." This is on view upstairs, and I also, some more homework, I challenge you to go upstairs and also see the portrait of Richard Howland Hunt's father, Richard Morris Hunt, in the exhibition, because they're almost in the exact identical frame. And they were not meant to be that way. So this was one of those goosebump moments when we were installing the show, that the frame for Richard Howland Hunt and the frame intended for his father's portrait are nearly identical without us knowing.
I think everybody that was installing the exhibition, people that were installing when I saw that hung after I saw the Richard Morris, I was like I sat down in front of the Richard Morris Hunt painting and I went, what? Because I hadn't seen it. I'd only seen the Richard Morris Hunt painting without its frame. That's how it was shown to me. And then I saw the frame, and then I saw that, and I was like, that is one of those super weird, cosmic, happy coincidences. Anyway, before it goes, we're going to get the two together, because I think it'll just be amazing. But yeah, I have to say, he brought that over, not really thinking I would pick that one, and I went, that one?
Yeah, that was the perfect one. And here you'll see on the bottom left the cracked glass trophy case, which again, as I mentioned, someone decided it would be a resting place, which it's not meant for that, just FYI. So this is a particularly difficult case. It's custom made. Geometrically, the glass for it is hard to replace, so it did take us quite a while to make sure that we were fabricating one with the right material to replace it, and now it's done with plexi, so that it can, again, safely hold these materials and, again, make them visible too. And I believe This now also has a UV filter on it, whereas the other one did not.
Yeah, it's a UV plexi.
Okay. More filming at Marble House, inside and out. Off to the breakers. The laundry list of the breakers, we did a lot of work at the breakers this past year. It requires a lot of work, as you can imagine. As you are aware, we opened the third floor for the first time to the public now almost 2 years ago, and work on that space, the Preservation in Progress Tour, continues. We have had a wonderful research fellow last year who is returning for a second year to focus solely on the furniture by A.H. Davenport, custom made for the second and third floors at the breakers, and it has revealed a whole wealth of information. We're also, of course, examining the textiles up there, which we'll get to in a few slides. I also had the opportunity to go to Madrid about 2 weeks ago. The Mapfre Foundation in Madrid and the Meadows Museum from Dallas had requested the Raimundo di Madrazo y Greta painting of Gertrude Vanderbilt for a Madrazo retrospective. Madrazo was one of the most respected 19th century Spanish artists. He painted royalty. He came to New York for 10 years straight for 6 months each year just to paint America's industrial wealth, and was remarkably important to society as well as to the art history canon. And just as much as John Singer Sargent or de Laszlo or Helou, he was an institution, and he deserves the recognition that he's getting. So we were very pleased to offer the Gertrude portrait as a loan to that exhibition where it currently is in Madrid. We've also had some international interest in one of the tables in the morning room, the Borghese table that the Vanderbilts had acquired. Conservation was done on that in order to make it publication ready for photography. Lots of work on the Children's Cottage, which was opened this summer. Our Art and Newport partnership, we did welcome 2 installations last year, which feels like 10 years ago almost. The Great Elephant Migration, as you remember, was on the back lawn of the breakers, as well as a very brief art happening by artist Hadi Falapishi on the second floor outdoor loggia. The ladies' reception room, as well as the breakfast room, received a lot of attention from one of our research fellows focusing on the analysis and survey of Allard interiors. A lot of work done on our library collections, an installation of a Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney sculpture that we recently acquired, and the list goes on and on and on and on. As part of the Davenport study, I want to focus on this too, because I know there's not a specific slide for it, but we were able to welcome Melissa Nolan. Melissa is the former curator of decorative arts from the White House collection and an expert on Davenport. Before Melissa joined us for a few days in August, we believed that we had the second largest custom collection of Davenport furniture ever made in America. The first being the collection that was made for the Theodore Roosevelt White House renovation in 1902. Turns out we have the largest collection of custom Davenport furniture ever made in America, thanks to Melissa's collaboration with us. So we outdid Teddy Roosevelt, which is very exciting. So it was great to have her here, and she's also going to be contributing to the Davenport entry as a part of our forthcoming collections catalog. So a great scholar in mind to be working on our collections, as well as our staff, of course. You can take this one.
Take a break. I can just flip through a couple of these. So yes, our Laura Bergman was studying Allard interiors as part of our research into Allard. We did a lot of work. We really focused highly on the ladies' reception room, and if you were able to see her presentation this year, it was fabulous. She's continuing to do some of that research, and we hope to publish a paper in the next couple, maybe in the next year or so, and also do analysis and more analysis work in the breakfast room. So some of those findings we're still going through them, which is kind of exciting because she created so much information. She found so much information about these rooms, just using the physical materials rather than a lot of, I guess you'd say, instead of a lot of research in terms of going to a lot of archives and things like that. This was the type of stuff that in conservation we do, which is sampling, studying, analyzing the building, analyzing the construction of the room and the different materials. Because we were working in that room and we emptied most of the furnishings out, and we were taking a lot of those items over into the Hunt exhibition, we were actually able to work in the room a little bit. We really don't get to work in that room very often. So Carla Schuler, our object conservator, and I got together, and she did a lot of stabilization in the room, and we did cleaning in the room. It needs a lot more work, and we hope to see that happen over the next 2 years. And we also were working on the furniture and some of the other objects that are in that room that are now on exhibition in the, I guess you call it the fourth gallery upstairs in those rooms. And our fellows, also our conservation fellows, the 2 conservation fellows, helped us out on a lot of those object treatments, so I thank them very much. The work on the studying of the furniture for the 3rd floor, what's wonderful about doing that study there in that space is that Isabella was working there, and as visitors come through on the Preservation in Progress tour, she's working there, and people can see her working there, and things, and they are able to see some of these pieces taken apart. It's just a really rare opportunity, I think, when people do go on the tour and someone is there working physically in the space. The 3rd floor, we've done, continued to do preservation work up, or there's some of our restoration and preservation work up there, and I want to say that we were focusing on the 17 and 18 bedroom suite primarily this year, and those are the rooms that have sort of that pinkish coral fabric. What's interesting, if you look to the picture to the right, and if you went to maybe, probably many of you went to our other lecture on the 3rd floor, so I won't go too much into this, but one of the things that we're looking for is the best preserved areas of the fabric for replication, so that we're trying to get the fabric, the wall fabrics, and the trims replicated, and some of those areas were discovered below the mirrors, which had been up for 120 plus years. So that is an area of a mirror. That was when the mirror was taken down. And then also, we did painting in that room. So the architectural boiserie, the wood paneling in that room we did paint study of it. And then because over time, paint is affected by both visible light and UV light, and so it can change. And one of the things that we noticed is it not only became embrittled, so it became dusty and crackly, and if you touched the wall, it would kind of fall off. And not only that happened, but there were areas that were overpainted due to damage, and then there were other areas that had just turned yellowish, and that is just the nature of the paint in exposure. So it didn't give you the original appearance. And so what I'm showing you in this photograph is before we did the work on the paint, the middle after we repainted the room, and then in comparison to the Ogden Codman drawings. So you can kind of see that it actually, the color is more, I said, complementary in a way to the fireplace surround with that white marble. And it also will work better with the furniture that's being preserved. Here's another image for this textile replication, is that we also removed another mirror in bedroom 16, which is the one that, if you're up there, it's the largest room in the southwest corner of the room, of the house on the 3rd floor, and revealed a beautiful example of the original blue fabric and the trim. And we're continuing to work with 2 different companies to both match the trims and the fabric for the project. And this is the installation after the restoration of the 2 bronze, I guess they're maquettes for the larger pieces, but these are now installed in the laundry circle. And we worked with Daedalus Art Conservation out of Boston on installing, conserving and installing these, so they're now visible. We do have unfortunate things happen on the property from time to time. We had a storm come up, very strong winds in, I think it was December of last year, and it knocked over one of our bronze large lanterns that are right there on the driveway. That kind of made us alerted to some other issues with those lanterns, so we're currently working, we've removed 2 of them on the drive to the Shepherd Avenue. And those will come back soon, and then we'll move them over. But basically, it was a corrosion of a pipe, an internal armature pipe that corroded, and under the wind blew that over. We're very lucky that no one was around it at the time, because I guess it was raining. But yeah, so it's going to come back, and it had damage before, so we're going to be repairing some of that previous damage as well. And then, as part of the Richard Morris Hunt, always keeping an eye out for things that we find around the house. When we were doing the Beneath the Breakers tour planning back in 2015, 2016, I had come across a piece of plaster molding, that cast plaster piece that someone had noticed was important and historic and put into a box with a little plexi thing on it, but kind of put it in the basement in a corner. And I said, we need to take that and put it in the collection storage in the basement because we need to figure out where that's from. 9 years later, they were talking about all these plaster pieces they wanted to put in the exhibition. And I remembered this piece and I said, I know it's from the house, I just don't exactly know where it was. And it's probably a surplus piece or a test casting or whatever of a molding in the house. We walked around the house and we found it in the ceiling of the dining room. So when you were upstairs, if you had a chance to look at the exhibition, that's what that piece is. It was in terrible condition, but we stabilized it and cleaned it and gave it a lovely permanent case. So it's a wonderful artifact from actually the building of the Breakers, which is really exciting. And yes, this table was actually in fairly good condition. It has been worked on previously, really great, but our marine air environment corrodes our gilded metals, and it didn't have a protective coating on it or anything, and so the gilded bronze that was on that table had gone green over the last 25 plus years since it had been worked on. So it was primarily the work that was done on it to clean it and prepare it for this catalog and for this upcoming publication. And if you can see in that corner, you can see the left side is the corroded part of the metal, and on the right side is the clean portion of the metal. So, and then Carola also did some stabilization of some of the decorative elements on it. So that was these photographs are also now going to be available for our catalog. What?
Hold on, go back. They're also now featured in a new publication by an Italian scholar who is basically taking and doing a historiography of all of the collections of the Borghese family and where they went to after the dispersion of the collection. And this is a particularly important table from the Borghese family's collection that the Vanderbilts acquired. I'm also conscious of the fact that we're going over time, so we're going to skip this slide. And we cleaned some books. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. Inventory and costumes, again, being moved out from the Breakers and going to our collections care facility where they will be more appropriately stored. The Breakers stable and carriage house, I'm going to go straight to the interesting part here. We were very lucky that the collection of Countess Antony Sapari lent us the original terracotta horse head that was from the family's New York stables. And if you look at the top left, I'm sorry that the image doesn't show it too well, but there is a red circle in the top left image, and that shows where this stag horse head was originally on the facade of the building. It was taken off around 1915 when Gladys Vanderbilt rented out the building to become a nightclub. But they retained the horse head. On the left is the horse head before treatment. It had been, left in an unprotected environment for quite some time, and Patty and her team did an incredible job cleaning it. We also had a custom platform made for it with the expertise of Dave Oakley, who is our master carpenter, and Dagan Franz. And here's a great video of that very long process, getting it up and putting it onto that platform in a very short amount of time. This is an incredibly heavy and fragile work of art, and we wanted to make sure that people could see it not just laying flat on the floor, but at an angle. So as you can see, there's Dagan's on top, and he's cranking some parts of the mechanism to make the top go down versus the bottom, but this was, as you can tell, required a lot of different hands just for one object. So this is currently on loan to the Breakers stable. Even though it's closed right now, it will remain there when we reopen for next year. Lots of cleaning of the carriages, and again, a loan from Countess Antony Sapari's collection of Bill Cunningham photos, original photos that the late, very famous and well-recognized New York Times style photographer took of various years of the coaching weekend here in Newport. At the Elms, we had many acquisitions. Again, Laura, as Patty had mentioned, did a lot of work as part of her Allard Interiors Fellowship. We do also currently have a French Heritage Society intern, Nadia Albertini, who will be here in November as part of our symposium, speaking on the work she's doing with Prel et Cie. Prel is a Lyon-based textile company, generations of one family creating these incredibly beautiful silk textiles for places like the Breakers, like Rosecliff in Newport, also for Palais Garnier in France, so an incredibly wide and well-known institution. And Nadia has been given, on our behalf, the first type of access to Prel's archives to try and comb out as much as she can about the projects that were done for Newport. Lots of work happening on the second floor with painting and repairing, continued work on Mr. Berwin's bedroom. We still haven't found the remaining pieces of furniture, so whoever is out there and has the Allard furniture for Mr. Berwin's bedroom, name your price. I'm tired of waiting. I would like to bring it all back. Lots of mold remediation, constant mold remediation in this climate, as well as the removal of the objects from the Elms stable and carriage house that now is the cafe. This is one of those great late-night text messages I got about an auction at Christie's. This is a small sculpture about 18 inches high by Pio Fedi, who was an Italian sculptor very well known in the 19th century. This was purchased by the Berwins and placed on the second floor hallway, right, is there, oh no, there's not, well, there was a little, it's gone, but even for the people on this side, where the marble column on the left of the picture is, he's just there sitting on a pedestal before you go down the hallway. This came up at Christie's. We're able to work very quickly with our collections committee to secure the funding for this, and we're able to return it to the Elms. Again, Laura's work here on the analysis of the material, as Patty was saying, in both the drawing room as well as the ballroom. Very interesting finds. I'm not going to tell you about them now because you should have come to her lecture. Work on Mr. Berwin's bedroom ceiling, of course, as we continue to research this space, and hopefully working with Prel soon to recreate the textiles. A lot of in-painting. It's absolutely fabulous right now, the way that it looks. Mold remediation. Leather is always the likely culprit here. More work on HBO's Gilded Age Season 3. And of course, we're excited for Season 4 to come back to Newport, right in the busiest time of our year, but we're looking forward to it. Rosecliff, we had closed out with a wonderful exhibition curated by Nikki Williams, Wild Imagination, Art and Animals in the Gilded Age, and then also our Richard Morris Hunt show. Years in the making, a restoration and preservation of the ceiling mural of Aurora by the Allard Studios that's upstairs in one of the galleries, and a very custom lighting system for the galleries upstairs. So hopefully you all were able to see Wild Imagination. Here are some of those highlights, focusing on animals and animal design as part of the Gilded Age. This is the reinstallation of the Aurora ceiling panel going into the gallery upstairs. Not an easy job, also done right as we were about to open the exhibition. And I'm just going to take a quick pause to focus on this project. In order for us to do exhibitions at the Preservation Society, we have to have very tightly controlled climate systems as well as lighting systems. Without those, we do not get extremely rare objects on loan. If you're the Library of Congress and lending out a one-of-a-kind drawing by Richard Morris Hunt, you want to make sure the environment that it's going to be in is perfect, regardless of the fact that while it's at the Library of Congress, it's in a metal box that's not climate controlled. But that's beside the point. We worked with our wonderful lighting designer, Sandra Leota's Lighting Design, based out of Newport, and Dave Oakley, our master carpenter, to create a highly customized lighting system for the spaces upstairs. Being mindful, of course, of the fact that we didn't want to disrupt much of the original material of Rosecliff ceilings. The lighting is actually installed from the floor panels above and not through the ceiling. It's not going up, it's coming down. So it's seamless. It can be removed if it needs to be, again, following preservation techniques, but it allows us to get to that nth degree of lighting measurement so that in each gallery, we can have a focus light on one object that's at one candle width measurement, and right next to it, an entirely different measurement. So that is how we were able to get those Library of Congress loans. And this was a big, big project. And wonderful work by Heather Hodge to stabilize one of our prized Worth gowns that will be on view in the Rosecliff vitrine, hopefully very soon. This is Patty's bragging rights. All the work that she did, all the work that she and her team did, these are all the objects just in our collection that she and her team worked on for the exhibition upstairs. So this was months and months of work, which is why we plan exhibitions so far in advance so that they can have the opportunity to really give these objects the time and attention that they deserve. And now we're going to stop talking. Do you have any questions? Jamie has a microphone over there, so if you have questions, please raise your hand. She'll bring it to you.
Kat
Oh,
also has
Kat
a
too?
microphone.
All right. Got a question over here? Right down here? Right here. Oh, let her bring the microphone over. Yes, we have friends on Zoom. Hello, members on Zoom.
Hi.
And
You
yes.
mentioned them on your exhibit upstairs. What are the dates for that?
That will be opening on February 6th and closing on March 29th. Thank you. Oh, right behind you, Kat.
I wonder what the significance is of that pineapple.
So during the colonial era, the romantic story goes is that people would place pineapples on the pediment of their homes to signal that they had returned from long voyages. It'd be a fresh pineapple that becomes an architectural attribute that continues in architecture. It does also have an underlying meaning, unfortunately. While it does symbolize hospitality, it does also bear the fact that where pineapples were coming in from and how they were being harvested, which was through, very brutal enslavement and colonization. So it has a dual meaning. We like to call it the bitter history of the pineapple. It has very positive connotations, but also very negative ones. Any other questions? Well, I'm sure you all are starving and want to get to dinner. So thank you again. Thank you for being members. Please renew your memberships. And thank you for your support of the Preservation Society.